Stop for a moment and answer this question honestly. Is the Monopoly man wearing a monocle? What about the evil queen in Snow White? Does she say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall," or "Magic mirror on the wall"? And Darth Vader's famous line, "Luke, I am your father." He says that, right? Here's the thing. The Monopoly man has never worn a monocle. Not once. Not in any edition. The evil queen says, "Magic mirror on the wall." She always has. And Darth Vader's actual line is, "No, I am your father." The word Luke is never spoken. You probably remembered all three incorrectly. So did millions of other people. So do researchers, professors, and scientists when tested without warning. This is the Mandela Effect. And it is not a quirk. It is not laziness. It is something far stranger, a systematic, predictable flaw in the architecture of human memory that scientists are only beginning to understand. My name is Quantumatrixx, and today, we investigate why your memory is lying to you, and whether the explanation is neuroscience or something much deeper. Let's follow the evidence. The name Mandela Effect comes from a specific memory. In 2009, paranormal researcher Fiona Broome was at a conference and mentioned, in passing, that she remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. She remembered news coverage. She remembered his funeral. She remembered his widow giving a speech. Nelson Mandela was alive. He had been free since 1990. He would go on to serve as president of South Africa and live until 2013. But here is what Broome discovered. She was not alone. Dozens of people at that conference shared the same false memory. And when she wrote about it online, thousands responded with the same experience: detailed, confident, emotionally vivid memories of an event that never happened. Broome proposed that these weren't false memories. She proposed they were real memories from a parallel universe where Mandela did die in prison, and that somehow, people from that universe had slipped into this one, carrying their memories with them. This is the paranormal explanation, and it became the name for the phenomenon. Science has a different answer, but it is almost as strange. To understand why millions of people share the same wrong memories, you need to understand how memory actually works. And the first thing to understand is that your memory is not a recording. This is the most important fact in this entire video. Memory is not a camera. It is not a hard drive. It does not store events the way a video file stores footage. Memory is a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain rebuilds it, pulling fragments from different neural networks, filling gaps with inference, adding details that seem plausible, and updating the file based on everything you've experienced since. The neuroscientist Elizabeth Loftus spent decades demonstrating this. In her most famous experiment, she showed participants footage of a car accident and asked them to estimate the speed of the cars. The only variable was the verb she used. How fast were the cars going when they smashed, versus when they hit, versus when they contacted? The word smashed produced significantly higher speed estimates. And 1 week later, participants who heard smashed were far more likely to falsely remember broken glass in the footage, even though there was none. The phrasing of a question changed what people remembered seeing, not what they thought about it, what they remembered. This is called the misinformation effect, and it is not a rare malfunction. It is how memory works, all the time, for everyone. So why do millions of people share the same false memories? Why is it always a monocle on the Monopoly man, not glasses, not an eye patch, not a scar? Why does the false memory have such a specific, consistent shape? There are three scientific explanations, and they work together. The first is pattern completion. The human brain is a prediction machine. It constantly fills in gaps based on what it expects to see. Mr. Monopoly is a wealthy Victorian gentleman. Wealthy Victorian gentlemen wore monocles. Your brain, working faster than conscious thought, completes the pattern. The monocle is inserted not from memory, but from inference, and then stored as memory. The second is social contagion of memory. When you hear someone else describe a memory, especially in detail, especially with confidence, your brain can incorporate their description into your own recollection. You don't realize it's happening. The memory feels like yours because, in a sense, it is. You built it from their description and your own fragments. This is why Mandela Effects spread so consistently online. Once millions of people discuss a false memory in detail, The description itself becomes a source that other people's brains draw from. The third explanation is the most recent and the most unsettling. In 2025, researchers at several institutions studying artificial intelligence discovered something unexpected. When multiple AI language models interact with each other, sharing information, discussing what they know, they develop collective false memories. The same Mandela effects that humans experience, the same confident wrongness. The AI systems weren't copying each other's errors randomly. They were converging on the same specific false conclusions, just as humans do. This suggests something important. The Mandela effect may not be a flaw in biological memory specifically. It may be an emergent property of any sufficiently complex information processing system that learns from social input. If that is true, then the question isn't why humans have false memories. The question is whether any intelligence that learns from a shared pool of information can avoid them. Now here is what makes the Mandela effect genuinely unsolved. The cognitive explanations, pattern completion, social contagion, misinformation effects, account for most cases very well. They explain why the errors are systematic. They explain why they spread. They explain why they feel so real. What they don't fully explain is the visual Mandela effect. In 2022, researchers at the University of Chicago published a study in which they tested the Monopoly Man monocle memory under controlled conditions. Participants were asked to reconstruct what Mr. Monopoly looks like from memory without any verbal cues. No questions about monocles. No suggestions. Just draw what you remember. A significant proportion independently added the monocle. This is harder to explain with social contagion. You can't accidentally absorb a visual detail from conversation the way you can absorb a verbal description. The false visual memory appears to be constructed independently by many different minds, all arriving at the same wrong answer. The researchers' conclusion was careful and somewhat uncomfortable. We cannot fully explain why large groups of people share specific false visual memories. The cognitive mechanisms we have identified are necessary, but not sufficient. The gap in the explanation is real and acknowledged. And then there is the deepest layer of the Mandela effect, the one that even skeptics find philosophically interesting. Your memories are not just records of the past. They are the foundation of your identity. They are how you know who you are, what you've experienced, what you believe to be true about the world. If memory is a reconstruction, if it is constantly being rewritten by suggestion, by social input, by pattern completion, then what exactly is it that you are remembering? If millions of people share a memory of an event that never happened, and that memory feels as real and vivid and certain as any other, then what is the difference between a false memory and a real one from the inside? Neuroscience doesn't have a clean answer. The feeling of certainty that accompanies a memory tells you nothing about its accuracy. The vividness of a recollection tells you nothing about whether it happened. You cannot introspect your way to the truth of your own past. So I'll leave you with this. Go back to those three questions. The Monopoly Man. The Evil Queen. Darth Vader. You were wrong. Confidently wrong. And so was almost everyone you know. If your memory can be this systematically, specifically wrong about things you have seen hundreds of times, things that feel certain, things that feel real, then how much of what you remember is reconstruction? How much of who you are is a story your brain wrote, revised, and filed as fact? And here is the question science has not answered. If millions of minds independently arrive at the same specific false memory, is that just a coincidence of cognitive architecture? Or is there something about the structure of shared human experience that makes certain errors inevitable? What Mandela effects do you remember? Leave your answer below. I want to know which ones feel most real to you. And if this investigation made you question something you were certain about, good. Subscribe, because next week, we go deeper.